women in search of safety, children in need of food, struggling for our freedom. So I am a refugee, women of hope and courage, living through poverty, fleeing from war and terror. So I am a refugee. I am a teacher. I am a worker. I am a woman. I am a refugee. I am a mother. I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a refugee. Fighting for education, speaking my native tongue, practicing my religion. So I am a refugee, powerful and resilient, seeing my people through, sharing my truth and wisdom. So I am a refugee. I am a speaker. I am a dancer. I am a singer. I am a refugee. I am a writer. I am a lawyer. I am a fighter.
To you. So come on up, Amy. So important. It is a great privilege to be here, and I thank Kate Harris for doing all the organizing that she's doing. I am sorry Frances couldn't be with us, but she is certainly here in spirit. To be celebrating grassroots organizing and communication. I'm a little embarrassed at the fancy car that we drove in on, but please let me explain. Those of you who heard the show yesterday know that we rented a car. We were originally flying up on JetBlue yesterday afternoon. But late Thursday, we saw the news from Wired.com about JetBlue handing over 5 million passenger itineraries to the Pentagon in September of 2002. A year ago, they handed over all of the passenger itineraries from that point back to the beginning of JetBlue 3 years before. It was given over to a military contractor, and they enhanced it. Whatever information wasn't there, the report goes, Social Security, how many kids in your family, whether you own a home, and all other, well, interesting, whatever relevant or what seems to me to be irrelevant information. I want to talk about lists, lies, and librarians. Starting with these lists. We're talking about this list handed over, and we had the JetBlue spokesperson on, as well as the founder of the website Don'tSpyOn.us, which is leading a campaign to boycott JetBlue and wanted a serious explanation. JetBlue was quite conciliatory and did not deny what they had done, said that they had egg on their face, that they had a serious privacy policy, and they would never do this again. But Don'tSpyOn.us said that it took a lot of work to get them to the point of admitting what they knew they had done. And it also highlights the issue of the CAPS list, that's the computer-assisted passenger program that the various airlines are complying with the Transportation Safety Administration, where passengers are divided into, and the list that was developed from the Pentagon from JetBlue dovetailed with this, they're dividing people into 3 categories. The green, who can go right through, orange, who will be stopped, and red won't fly. Red won't fly. These are very serious times, and unfortunately the people targeted most are Arab Americans, people of Arab descent, Muslims, and we all have to stand up for dissent in this country because it is making it safer for other people who perhaps will be targeted much more than you. And whether you agree with someone or not, it is agreeing for their right to say something. It is harder to target someone when everyone around them is standing up. And I think the point of Pacifica Radio and the point of Democracy Now! Is to make dissent commonplace in this country, which makes us all safe. The lists. You've got the JetBlue list, you've got the CAPS list, and now the Bush administration has announced their terror list is complete. They have just completed this week, they say, a list of 100,000 terror suspects that will now be given out to government agencies and private companies, airline, ticket counter. What does this mean? As Michael Ratner, the president of the Senate program this week, terror suspects? That means everyone on this list, they have not been convicted of any crime. They are, quote, suspects. How do you get on this list? What do you mean they're giving it to private companies? Merging corporate information with government information. What kind of control do we have? So the terror list, as John Ashcroft said, the Attorney General of the United States, it is now a site of one-stop shopping for the government and the corporations. All the information is right here. Oh, really? But there is a silver lining to this, because the more they do this, the more the right and left are united. Conservative Republicans, together with progressives, are deeply concerned about corporate and government invasions of privacy, and they are fighting back. You have John Poindexter, the convicted felon, who supposedly now is no longer the head of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects project at the Pentagon. Right, remember DARPA, let's see, there's all sorts of projects. First, and think about this, each one is a grassroots victory that we are saying that it at least had to be on the surface canceled. Of course, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but they're floating these things and each one ups the ante. Tips. That was the original program announced by John Ashcroft, that your mail deliverer, your FedEx person or UPS guy, when he goes to your home or when she goes to your home, just, sneak a peek and see if there's anything fishy going on. Be a responsible neighbor and report on your neighbors. Now, we've seen this before, decades before. It's why also the media is totally ahistoric, right? Doesn't want you to know about the past, and yet it is so important to remember to go way back to the Palmer raids and the deportation wholesale of so many people, going to the McCarthy era, because we are seeing the beginnings of this again, certainly for some populations, not just the beginning. And for other populations, people are doing swimmingly, and they say, don't exaggerate, this is the greatest democracy on earth. And for many, there is more freedom here than anywhere on earth. But for others, they live in a totally different world. Yes, they are terrorized. They are being picked up without warrants. They are being detained in for-profit detention centers by Wackenhut and the Corrections Corporation, that are run by Wackenhut and the Corrections Corporation of America. I mean, these very frightening times where we don't think we are benefiting, we are just banding together because we're afraid and we want to make the world a safer place, are boon times for military contractors, for for-profit prison organizations, companies like Wackenhut and the Corrections Corporation for America. And we did a piece on this a week or two ago. The immigrant detentions are a real boon industry for these companies because in jails, they get something like $35 for regular prisoner a day. They get $175 or more for immigrants. Now, the cost of keeping them is the same, but they profit when immigrants are detained. And what recourse do they have? Let's look at what's happening to immigrants today. And then from that perspective, we say, is this the America that we are fighting to preserve? You can be picked up in your home. Often you have federal authorities that don't even show a warrant, but the person doesn't realize that they don't have to open the door. They're picked up, they are spirited away to one of these facilities, and they can be kept indefinitely. You have people like Jose Padilla, who has been classified, he's an American citizen, as an enemy combatant, and he has 0 rights. My brother, David, a reporter, was talking recently to someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, and he said, interestingly, the USA Patriot Act actually simply codifies a lot of the things we could do already. He said we could go into libraries before and we could check people's records and all of that. And what's frightening about it to people is that it's just now written down on paper and you see the leeway we have. He said, but when it comes to enemy combatants, when it comes to Guantanamo, and this was a conservative attorney, he said, the Constitution is absolutely thrown out. He said, he, as a U.S. attorney, said no place. If they're supposed to stand up for the Constitution, there is absolutely no place for them anymore in these places. These are very, very frightening times. And you see how it works. It's first applied to the most unpopular people, right? Jose Padilla. And the only thing we know about him is that he is an enemy. Remember, the only thing you know is what the government tells you. It's sort of like Lori Berenson in Peru. For years, the only thing people knew is what the government of Peru was saying, the terrorista feminista. And you forget that you have no other knowledge of these people, like the people on Guantanamo Bay. Absolute Taliban trying to kill Americans supporting Al-Qaeda. Who are they? It turns out some people have been released who were there for over a year, and they weren't involved with this at all. But we don't talk to them, and they are sent away. Some die there. So you focus on the most unpopular who have no voice, and then you make your way up the ladder of society. Not that there should be that kind of class society. And it's not just the reason why we should care. We should care about every human being. But I think a lot of people are beginning to understand how serious this is. Certainly, librarians are. Librarians who come to be on the front lines of the fight for freedom. Your local librarian, your freedom fighter. This past week, John Ashcroft finished his tour for the USA Patriot Act. And he took on the American Library Association, the largest library association in the world. And he said that they are hysterics and that they are creating hysteria. And yet these people are the ones who were targeted by Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act that says that FBI agents can go to bookstores and libraries and they can demand the records of people they choose. And librarians must turn those records over, and they may not tell anyone that the FBI has come in. Not even another librarian, unless they need to get the information from that other person. And if they dare say anything, they themselves will be prosecuted. So you have an FBI agent who comes in and says, I want to see anyone come in here with an accent, I want to see what they read today. Now, the American Library Association has taken some action. The program that many of the libraries use erases the names of people after they've returned books if they're returned on time. And the ALA has reminded librarians, do not leave a paper trail. There is no reason to keep notes. when someone comes in and asks for information. I mean, think also about computer use. And the FBI can go in and ask who's been on the computer, what have they used on the internet, what sites have they looked at. Well, often public libraries are the places where people who have fewer resources come when we're trying to decrease the digital divide in this country, that everyone should have access, that remarkable place that is the internet, where we can grassroots globalize with people around the world. When people don't have their own computers, you can go to the library, and so you are more vulnerable. Once again, it is a certain sector of people who are targeted more than others. And so librarians are still organizing. They may not be able to speak out, but some will put up signs that says something like, the FBI could be here, you should know this. But others are concerned about doing that because they don't want to scare people away. And others are quietly resisting in their ways. Librarians, we had Mitch Friedman on, the former head of the American Library Association, as they organize all over this country for the right of people. They know that people are there and that they are on the front lines of fighting for people's privacy. Yes, we're in very difficult times. I know many of you have come to talks before that I've given, and I always talk about, I just came from Manchester, New Hampshire, Jim Hightower's Rolling Thunder tour, and all groups from all over New Hampshire were gathering. It's so exciting in this period, so important in an election year, that people are galvanized or participating, whatever it is you choose to do, that you are active. But it's so important now that we see that hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people are involved. This is not a story of apathy, as the mainstream media likes to talk about. And I think Pacifica Radio is a part and parcel of this incredible movement in this country that connects the dots of so many groups. And I'm going to give one example that has been so important, and that is the FCC. This tremendous victory right now that I think is only the beginning. But you have Michael Powell, yes, son of Colin Powell. He leads the war on Iraq, and his son Michael Powell leads the war on diversity of voices here at home. Chair of the 5-commissioner FCC, who very stealthily and quietly through this year tried to pass, and did succeed on June 2nd, rules that would launch the largest media consolidation that this country has ever seen. Rules that would allow the Rupert Murdochs of the world to take over newspaper, radio, and television in any one town, so that you have one voice broadcasting one voice. Now, people across the political spectrum have a gut revulsion, fear of something like that. So you have Powell trying to do this for his corporate cronies, the Viacoms and the Rupert Murdochs, who owns News Corp, which runs Fox, because they're already breaking the rules even before June 2nd. One of the rules is that there is a cap, that no media network can reach more than 35%, a third of the U.S. population. It's called a monopoly. Now, both Viacom, which owns CBS, and Rupert Murdoch, which owns Fox, who owns News Corp, which owns Fox, have surpassed that. And they are going toward 45%. And so Michael Powell, to serve the paymasters that support those in power, and I would put corporate Democrats together with corporate Republicans, who are serving them, who are not challenging campaign finance laws and all of that. They are doing their bidding, and they want to increase the cap so these guys don't have to sell off any of their stations or newspapers or radio stations. But we've already experienced media consolidation thanks to President Clinton and Vice President Gore with the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which was one of the most important and horrifying acts in the last 50 years that allowed for this media consolidation that Michael Powell was just capping off. And what came out of that and I hope all that you are signing the email lists as they pass around. What came out of that was Clear Channel owning a couple dozen stations, now owning more than 1,200 stations in this country. And we see the direct effects when it comes to war. Clear Channel, run by the cronies of George Bush, major campaign contributors in the time of the invasion of Iraq, are holding pro-war rallies and firing broadcasters who dare to speak out against war and won't attend the pro-war rallies. Like the South Carolina Broadcaster of the Year, who dared to voice anti-war sentiment, she's fired. And then she talks about how she was being forced to go to these pro-war rallies. Media must serve a democratic society and present all of the views. Not only does Clear Channel own the radio stations, they run the venues of artists, big centers like the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, where Ani DeFranco performed on March 16th, the night that the bombs began falling on Baghdad. And we experienced directly what it means to be in a Clear Channel venue. When Ani performs, she has all the political tablers out there so they can get out their information, a kind of big tent, a political carnival, so that people can share information and all sorts of groups can gather together. She's told that night there will be no political tabling. She says, what are you talking about? Well, she had invited me to come to represent Democracy Now! And talk about independent media to the thousands of young people who had come to hear her so that they would be revved up as Ani came onto the stage and understand the significance of what it means to be an independent artist and how that connects to independent politics and media. So I called up on the cell phone and she said, we may be closing this place down. We may not be able to perform tonight. She was backstage. She said, we're trying to fight hard to be able to keep the mic on because they're telling us we can't table. Anyway, I got in with some folks from Democracy Now! And Jeremy Scahill was with me. He had just flown in from Baghdad, now producing again for Democracy Now! And we were supposed to go on stage to welcome people. And as we come in, we have our little flyers that let people know where they can hear Democracy Now! And let them know democracynow.org is also a place you can see and hear us. And as we go in, the security says, open your bag. Now, perhaps you can understand in a very serious time that they're concerned and that they would have metal detectors or something like this. No, these were political detectors and detectives. And they said, what are those flyers? You're not allowed to bring them in here. Oh, that is the danger now? That is the threat? I said, are you actually reading everyone's literature and deciding what goes in? They said, listen, you don't get in here if you don't check that. Check your ideas at the gate. And so, well, we stuffed some in our pockets and had to leave the backpack behind us, and we went on in. And then we were also with Miles Soleil of Not in Our Name. And he's wearing a t-shirt that says something very dangerous. It says, not in our name. The person who meets us, one of Ani's people, says, could you zip up your sweatshirt over that? Because you probably won't get backstage if you wear it. And they say, we're going to move ahead anyway. You're going to go up on the stage, and you're going to take the microphone, and you're going to say what you're going to say, and they'll probably shut down the mics. And if that's true, reach back for Ani's mic and pick it up. It'll be live, and keep on talking. And so, we came in the back, and Miles was zipped up, but as we went down on the stage, he unzipped his sweatshirt so you could see his radical slogan, and we started to talk about the importance of independent media and going to where the silence is. And Jeremy hurled some of the flyers that said, Democracy Now! And the mics were not turned off. We finished what we had to say, introduced Ani DeFranco. She came up on the stage to a roar, and she said, that's 1 for us and 0 for the knuckleheads. And she began to sing. And this fear of expressing dissent has to be challenged at every single level. The points where you feel, when you're simply at work and someone says something and they're walking to the water cooler and someone else says, what do they have to say there? Defending them. It's at the smallest level that it makes a difference. Let's not forget Margaret Mead's famous line. But it's more than a line. The idea, she said, never forget for a moment that a small group of dedicated, committed people can change the world. Indeed, nothing else ever has. It starts at home. It starts right here. It starts when you're at home at night talking to your kids or talking back to the television if you choose to watch it. And yes, Democracy Now! Is now on TV, by the way, so I would say that the revolution may well be televised, but in addition, for working with community radio stations and public radio stations to get us on, don't forget you have your public access TV station, and we're very excited that we're broadcasting in several places here. You can get us on any public access TV station daily. We're a television show as well as a radio show. And we're pleased to announce that in the last few years, we've gone from 20 radio stations now to 160 radio and television stations around the country.
I am a fighter, and I am a refugee. Women will come together, linking our destinies. Guided by intuition, no longer a refugee. Women of strength and beauty, driven by faith and heart, moving our people forward, no longer a refugee. I am a builder, I am a seeker, I am a dreamer, and I am a refugee.